sisters and brothers, comrades and friends, we're going to start the program. Okay, welcome to the 28th Annual Toronto Socialist May Day celebration. Around the world, or it will be come Saturday, millions are marching. They are demanding an end to austerity and war, an end to destruction of the environment, an end to big business rule. The theme of this celebration is defend jobs and services. The public sector is under relentless attack. The ruler plan to eliminate all mail delivery is but one example. But we are fighting back. We are We are inspired by the North America campaign to raise the minimum wage, by the actions by young workers to demand rights in the fast food industry, by the release of 2 of the Cuban 5, and by the gains of the Quebec Solidaire Party. Drawing further inspiration from the Indigenous people movement, Idle No More, we say it's time that working people reject labor concessions and reject the labor fakers who keep the capitalist system on life support. We say it's time to rise up, cut the ties that bind us to a system that offers nothing but disaster and untold suffering. In the words of Solidarity Forever, let's bring to birth a new world from the ashes of the old. My name is Elizabeth Byce, and I'm a retired member of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers, Federal Treasurer of the NDP Socialist Caucus, and a leading member of Socialist Action, and your host for this evening. Currently, we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of the founding of Socialist Action in Canada. Our annual international conference will be held 4 weeks from now, May the 23rd, 24th, and we warmly invite you to attend. It will be the best educational conference this year in North America, with speakers from 4 countries, so please don't miss it. Get your tickets tonight. And if you want to change the world, get directly involved. We warmly invite you to join Socialist Action. For 128 years, workers have celebrated May 1st as a day of international working class solidarity. It is a day to honor those who have fallen in the struggle for workers' rights. It is a day to renew our fight for a world free from exploitation and oppression. May Day was first celebrated, believe it or not, in the United States. Mass demonstrations of workers demanding a shorter working day, the 8-hour day movement, clashed with police in the streets of Chicago in 1886. The red flag of the Paris Commune of 1871 was their banner. Later, the Socialist International in Europe adopted May 1st as an international day of workers' solidarity, and it spread around the world. May Day is our day, unlike Labor Day in September, which treats labor like a commodity. May Day honors workers as a class, a conscious fighting movement, a living creative force which has the power to change the world. We know that on May Day we celebrate our social and political achievements, and we renew our struggle for socialism and workers' power. We also remember those departed. It is fitting at this time that we do that. We want to honor the lives of some outstanding individuals who passed away within the last year. Ali Mustafa was an editorial associate of New Socialist website from Toronto. He died on April the 9th along with at least 9 other people in an airstrike by forces of the Assad regime on the neighborhood of Ad Arsia in Syria. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, born in Colombia, was Latin America's foremost novelist, the creator of the literary genre known as magical realism. He died at age 87 in Mexico City on April 17. Gabo, as he was affectionately called, won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1982 for his novel 100 Years of Solitude. He openly advanced socialism and anti-imperialism views, and was a personal friend of Fidel Castro. Pete Seeger, a giant of folk music and political activism, died on January 27th at the age of 94. Though we had differences with Pete, he supported the Democratic Party from Roosevelt through Obama, and for a time made excuses for Joseph Stalin, but nonetheless was a powerful force for workers' rights and international solidarity. His music, including such anthems as Where Have All the Flowers Gone, If I Had a Hammer, Turn, 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 Little Boxes, and his version of We Shall Overcome, will live forever. Nelson Mandela, died on December the 5th at age 95. As a radical lawyer, he sacrificed the comforts of life to devote himself fully to the struggle against legal apartheid, serving decades in prison. Although his ANC government perpetrated economic apartheid, Mandela inspired the world by his devotion to the anti-racist causes, imbuing the fight for freedom with a great dignity. Reuben Hurricane Carter, the boxer whose wrongful murder convictions became an international symbol of racial injustice, died on April the 20th at age 76. He had been stricken with prostate cancer in Toronto, the New Jersey native adopted home. Carter was freed in 1985 after 19 years in prison. In 1993, he helped found the association in defense of the wrongly convicted and was its executive director through 2004. And as of today, sisters and brothers, the NDP MP for Trinity, or the former, I should say, NDP MP for Trinity Spadina, Brother Dan Heap, passed away today at the age of 88. Tonight we also honor the memory of countless other militants in Palestine, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Egypt, Syria, Turkey, Haiti, Sri Lanka, Colombia, Philippines, and many other countries who fell in struggle against imperialism and its pliant regime. Please rise now and let us now observe a moment of silence in honor of all the artists, working militants, and socialists who have left us this past year. Thank you, sisters and brothers, but please stay standing because we're going to ask Barry to come up and lead us in what we do every year in singing the Internationale to open up the May Day.
Is this nice? You want to come up? Okay, sisters and brothers, comrades and friends, the words are on the tables in front of you. You can sing it in English, in French, in Spanish, or how you wish. Arise, ye prisoners of starvation, arise, ye wretched of the earth, for justice thunders condemnation, a better world's in birth. No more traditions change to bind us, rising slaves, no more enthralled. The earth shall rise on new foundations, we have been not, we shall be all. 'Tis the final conflict, let each stand in their place. The international working class shall be the human race. 'Tis the final conflict, let each stand in their place. The international working class shall be the human race. Happy May Day.
Okay, so our first speaker this evening, sisters and brothers, is the newly elected president of the Toronto local of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. And she is also the first black sister to lead the largest CUPW local. We are proud to work with her in the ongoing fight to defend Canada's postal service. So please give a rousing welcome to my sister from my union, Megan Whitfield.
Thank you, Sister Byce. Thank you, sisters and brothers. My name is Megan Whitfield, and I come to you with greetings from the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. As you are aware, on December 11th, 2013, Deepak Chopra, our CEO, announced cuts to Canada Post. Canada Post brought forth a 5-point plan, and one of the main plans was to eliminate door-to-door delivery.
Shame.
Now what he did with Harper and his Conservative government is actually the day after Parliament closed for Christmas break, he announced this plan. And he used the financial crisis in regards to doing this and the threat to our pension and the economy. But before that, we have to go back. Because during the strike and lockout, they said Canada Post was not an essential service, and nobody wanted the mail, and they started looking at decline in regards to mail. Right? The Canadian Union of Postal Workers, as long as working people, have always fought for change. Right? The postal workers were the ones that went on strike to get women maternity leave.
Yep.
Working people were the ones that helped lift people out of poverty in regards to wages and benefits. So when Harper thought that nobody wanted door-to-door delivery and the impact, what's been happening is the public has been pushing back. Right? We know that the mail is our fundamental right. There is a charter that every Canadian has the right to door-to-door delivery, and this is now being taken away. In regards to how are we going to fight back, right? Millions of people depend on the mail, no matter how absolute, and yes, letter mail has been declining, but not to the extent of what Harper and Deepak Chopra is saying. We've made profits for the last 18 years, with 1 year that Canada Post actually lost money, was because they locked us out, and they said we weren't essential, right? And we pay dividends to the Canadian public. We are not a strain on the government. As a matter of fact, we've put back $1.5 billion into the Canadian economy and paid taxes since 1996. But what this cut means is it's affected the most vulnerable, which are the seniors and people with disability. Now they're saying, Deepak says that when we do eliminate door-to-door mail service, we'll have community mailboxes and you could go to the community mailboxes. But we know for sure these boxes are not safe, they are dangerous, and what is going to happen with our seniors? Well, Deepak said that the way to do it is the seniors will be able to get out and be sociable, and this will give them their exercises, right? What's been happening is, what are we going to do? Like, what they've also done is trying to cripple the post office by now increasing stamps to $1, where people will not use the mail, right? People depend on the mail not just to get letters. We are now the source of delivery. We just don't deliver letters. We deliver everything from medications to diapers, right? We are the cheapest form of mail delivery anywhere. And imagine, Canada is going to be the only country in the G20 that does not have door-to-door delivery. Like, this is a shame to think that Harper is not just attacking us because it starts here with us. It's the Postal Service today, but it's not just us. It's an attack on workers and services. Good paying union jobs and federal services, right? As well, what did Harper announce this week in regards to now attacking our pensions? We've worked our lives. First it was retirement at 65, he's pushed it to 67. Now they're bringing in a new formula in regards to how he's going to take more money out for us to pay when it comes to our pension. Taking away defined benefits where we know when we work, when we retire, we're going to have a living wage. We want to get rid of that. Won't keep you much longer, right? However, as well, the mail is the most secure service that any Canadians have, right? Yes, there's the internet, but is the internet as secure as the mail? The mail service is even more secure than the mail. We saw what happened this month with the Revenue Canada in regards to the heartbeat virus, and how the only way the government showed you that they could trust was through the mail. All those people that were affected, they wouldn't even call them. They said what they said they're going to do is give you registered mail, because that's one of the only protections Canadians have. They cannot come and take your mail without a warrant. They can't open your mail. So we need to help get together and push back. Right? There's a lot that everybody's doing. I was out today with Andrew Cash from the NDP canvassing, and you would be surprised how mad people are that they want to take away door to door. So when people say no, we don't want it, and on top of it, we have a government that don't care about the public. That's right. Never consulted the public to say, is this something that we wanted, right? And to say, instead of going to go forward, pushing backwards, it's an attack on living workers' rights. It's an attack on everybody's rights. And if he could take this away from us without consulting, what's he going to do next? We have to get up. We have to fight. Right? This is the movement that this is a livelihood, and it doesn't stop here. I'd like to thank you. Thank you very much for giving me the time and the opportunity to be here and speak with you guys today. And hopefully, the movement will continue. Next week, the NDP across the country is having a day in regards to Save Canada Post, and in all the ridings, they're doing canvassing. So anywhere there's an NDP riding, we're asking you to get your support. because we will be out there hitting the pavements. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you, sister. Our next speaker is an Executive Vice President of the Canadian Labour Congress. She comes out of QP, Ontario, and celebrates her Jamaican heritage and is seeking re-election at the CLC convention in Montreal in early May. Please welcome Sister Marie Clarke Walker.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Room. This is good. I'm liking this. When I came in, there were what, like 5 people or so, and I was like, But I'm really happy that all of you are here. It's been an interesting year. As you all know, we are dealing with austerity, and not just at one level of government. We're dealing with austerity and coming out through our yin-yang. Municipal government, provincial government, and federal government. We know municipally where Ford wants to go. I still can't believe that there are people out there that still want to support. It's hard watching. I travel a lot, and I'm in a cab one day, and this guy from, it's an airport cab, so there are a bunch of people in there. This guy from California is talking about, have you guys heard about this guy, this mayor in Toronto? And I'm trying to hold my head down. And so, I mean, he's the talk all over. He has made us look like idiots. That's putting it mildly. But that's what we have to deal with. So we have to work really hard to make sure that he's not reelected, to make sure that he leads sooner rather than later. I'm disappointed with those in my own community who stand up behind him when he's on TV talking about how much they love him, and you know, Megan and I are doing what we can to make sure that we kick them in the ass. Provincially, we're dealing with Win, but I'm more concerned about Hudak right now. I'm concerned about what's going to happen if we don't all get out there, and it's not just about voting, it's about doing the education around why we can't support Hudak, or why we can't let him come up the middle. It is so important. This whole thing, even though he's backed off on some of the things, this right to work for less and all the things that he's pushing is definitely not in our interest. It's not in our best interest at all. The broader labor movement doesn't want us to talk about right to work, but those who know me know that while I am part of the broader labor movement and part of the labor leadership, I do push the envelope a heck of a lot, and I don't even look at it as pushing the envelope. I look at it as speaking truth to power, right? And so we don't want to talk about right to work, but we need to talk about right to work. We need to talk about what it is. We need to educate people about what it is, because we don't talk about it. My next door neighbor, who's never been in a labor movement, who's never been part of a union, will not know what we're talking about. Our kids will not know what we're talking about, and they'll be thinking, right to work? Oh, that means I'm going to get a job somewhere. Therefore, we need to talk about it. We need to be open and honest about it every chance we get. That leads us to Harper and everything that he has done since the minute he stepped in office. And can you believe, even though he screwed us over time and time again, he ended up with a majority. He ended up with a majority because some of our labor folks voted for him. Let's not mince words. Let's not, lie about it or pretend that it didn't happen. That's the only way he could have won a majority. So again, we need to get out there and talk about what he's really like, what he really is, and make sure we push back. It's a time, I think, when we talk about May Day, when we talk about workers' rights, it's a time that we need to talk about working together. Not just working together with labor and community, but working together as a union movement. Megan talked about Canada Post and the struggles that they're dealing with. This is not just about Canada Post letter carriers or CUPW jobs. This is about the pulp and paper mills. This is about manufacturing. This is about the QP staff that are in administrative roles. This is about all of the unions and how that is going to affect them negatively. And we need to start, when we frame that picture, we need to stop talking about it's only CUPW or it's only, the CPAA that's going to hurt, or PSAC that's gonna hurt, or public services that's gonna hurt. It's all of us that's gonna hurt. It's not just labor that's gonna hurt, it is communities that are gonna hurt. It's people with disabilities who cannot leave their homes and go to a mailbox 5 miles down the road to pick up their mail. It's about seniors who don't have the ability to leave their home. It's about those who have mental illnesses that don't want and can't leave their homes. So it's more than just about the workers, and we need to frame it in that vein. Today I was pleasantly surprised, and I can't explain how pleasantly surprised I was. I was at the Unifor. For those who don't know, Unifor is the new union that's made up of the Canadian Auto Workers and the Communication Energy Paper Workers. So I was at their Ontario Regional Council in Port Elgin. There were about 700 members there. And again, for those who know me, I am critical of the labor movement. I am a left of center labor activist, and I mean, my mom can tell you, my dad can tell you, they're Marxists and they're socialists, and so I don't know anything other than that. That is what I think the labor movement is supposed to be about. And I know for a lot of people, the labor movement has been a disappointment in the last number of years. I push. There are a number of us that push, but we all need to be pushing together to make sure that it goes in the direction that we want it to go in, which is to the left. Not to the right, not to the center, but to the left. And today I was pleasantly surprised. Every time I write a speech, I make sure that there is a class analysis in there and there is a race analysis in there. I mean, look at me, right? Every time that speech goes to communication, I get it back, working people. Working people. And every time I say, no, we're talking about the working class. Yes, we're talking about working people, which to me includes unemployed, underemployed, all of those, and other marginalized folks. But we need to talk about working class. And when I say I was pleasantly surprised, the president of Unifor, Jerry Dias, stood there and at least 20 times said the phrase, working class. Didn't blink, didn't flinch, talked about his socialist roots openly. We all know that CAW tended to be liberal, right? Talked about his socialist roots openly and talked about what it is we need this labor movement to do. And yeah, I was pleasantly surprised because it's the first time that I've been to a CAW-CAP meeting where that was openly talked about and openly discussed. So I think we are well underway. There is an election coming up, there is a convention coming up, it will be a doozy of a convention. I think that this will probably be the most important convention that we've seen in labor for a while. And I know we hear all the time around elections, regular elections, that this will be the most important election in our time. But I truly believe federally, provincially, municipally, the elections that are coming up will be the most important elections for those of us who believe in progressiveness, for those of us who believe in socialism, for those of us who believe that the movement is the one that needs to push workers forward. It's the most important set of elections because if those who are currently there, Harper, Ford, and if we allow Hudak to come in, there will be no more movement. There will be no more labor movement. There will be no more meetings like this because they will make sure that this becomes a crime. And I don't want to see that happen, and I know every single one of you in here don't want to see that happen, so let's stand together, sisters and brothers. Let's stand together. Let's do the right thing. Let's stand up for our rights. Let's not give up the fight. Solidarity forever.
Sister, and as you were speaking, I realized when I said that your Jamaican heritage, Megan too, of course, got Jamaican heritage, and here you are working for the workers in Canada, and here I am going to Jamaica, and I just negotiated, by the way, I want you sisters to know, a very good collective agreement for the staff at my condominium in Jamaica. So you see, we're within the national solidarity. Okay, our next speaker, representing Put Food in the Budget, the dynamic anti-poverty organization that put Premier Kathleen Wynne on trial in February and is one of its leading spokespersons. So please join me in welcoming Sister Sharon Anderson.
Yeah.
Sorry, sister.
There you go.
Sorry. Hello, good evening. My name is Sharon, and I'm here to bring you greetings from Put Food in the Budget. And I apologize, I'm getting over a cold, so I may sound a little, yeah. I want to talk about some success that Put Food in the Budget has had. So Put Food in the Budget is a grassroots activist group that's been working to hold the provincial government, hold their feet to the fire on the promises made but not kept to reduce poverty. And the broad goal is to achieve social and economic justice for the growing numbers of poor people in this province. And the campaign was, sorry about that. The campaign started in 2009 in response to Dalton McGuinty's bringing in a poverty reduction strategy that did not include a raise in social assistance rates. And one of the things that we started talking about and pushing on was that there should be an immediate $100 increase for people on social assistance as a down payment on adequate rates so that people can live a life of health and dignity. In 2012, there was the Lankin Shake report on the Social Assistance Review. When that report came out in 2013, one of the recommendations was actually to raise the rates by $100. And before some of the grassroots anti-poverty groups were talking about raising the rates by $100, no one, that was like not possible. It was like two years ago, it was like that couldn't possibly happen. But yet, in the recommendations, now of course, that's not, the government is very likely not actually going to, do that, but they weren't talking about it before. Sorry. And so that's a win, and that's something that we want to build on, though, and that's work that has taken. It takes time to achieve that. One of the other successes that we've had in talking about raising social assistance rates is the last year in the budget they put in an extra $14 for people on OW. Now, $14 is really, it's not very much. And you can't really do an awful lot with that. But when the finance minister, Sousa, at one of the latest rounds of the poverty reduction consultations was challenged on that amount, he was like, well, what are you talking about? We gave you your first $14 on that $100 ask. Like what, and the importance of that is he framed that as our money, and it's important to remember that that's money that they didn't want to give us, but they felt the pressure because we kept pushing, and we're going to continue to keep pushing. Thank you. So as at the sorry. One of the other sort of things that we work on as a anti-poverty group is the minimum wage, the current minimum wage campaign, and that we're involved in that is because we see the link between social assistance rates being so low and minimum wage being so low that workers can't actually afford to pay food and rent. And this is completely wrong and shameful, and the money is there. It's just that the government is not has not been held accountable, and we're going to hold them accountable. Good. So these as the previous speaker was saying, the upcoming elections, each set of them are going to be so important this year. and next. And we want to work together with other groups on these issues to make sure that we actually win, because that's how we're going to win. If we all work together and in solidarity to achieve a province, a country where we can all live a life of health and dignity, because the kind of society that we want to live in is one where everyone is supported and included, in my opinion. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sister. Our next guest is an organizer for the Ontario Coalition Against Poverty and one of Canada's best speakers for socialist change, always on the cutting edge. OCAP is for its innovative campaigns to raise welfare rates by means of the Medical Special Diet Challenge, and fought militantly to increase the minimum wage and to upgrade social housing. So please welcome the man at the center of the anti-poverty struggle, Comrade John Clarke.
Thanks very much, comrades. If we're gathered here to talk about the May Day that's coming up, and we look back over the last year, there are many reasons to feel that we need to take stock of the situation, and there is certainly no grounds for overconfidence. But on the other hand, any sense of pessimism would, in my estimation, be totally misplaced. We are living in a period when there have never been more people engaged in struggles than is taking place right now. There's even recognised in some article I was reading the other day in one of the mainstream newspapers pointing out that the mass protests that have taken place in the last period are at historic highs. We've just seen, just look back over the last very short period of time, and you see a mobilisation of people in Spain that is in the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands. You see people everywhere looking to fight back, and you see the kind of discussions that take place here tonight breaking out, where people are talking in terms of how do we reorganise, how do we refocus, how do we organise to fight in different ways. The struggles that have taken place in the United States around low-wage workers and the minimum wage have been marked by innovative tactics, by unions looking at different approaches, forming links with community organisations and fighting back in ways that are imaginative. So that is the strength. That is the power and the hope of what we see. The working class is not crushed. The working class is actually fighting back on an international scale that is enormous and is impressive, and those struggles are not something that is not happening right here in Canada and right here in Toronto as well. So we don't start from a position of pessimism. But on the other hand, I think we would have to take stock of the situation and say that while there are some enormous struggles that are taking place, and while sometimes the very regimes that implement the austerity agenda are being toppled, at the same time we're living in a period as well where the ruling class is riding things out, is reorganising, is surviving, is subverting and diverting movements, and is actually managing to stay in power, and not just to stay in power, but to proceed with their agenda. They may make some tactical retreats and they may make some tactical concessions, but at the same time the attack is intensifying and it is continuing. Indeed, I think as you look at the situation with regards to the prevailing agenda of austerity, we have to recognise that it is a work in progress. And it is being redefined and it is being intensified as they go, in ways that a few years ago even they wouldn't have thought possible. One of the defining events of the year, as far as I'm concerned, is the British Prime Minister David Cameron standing up at the Lord Mayor's banquet in London and announcing that austerity is no longer a temporary way of reorganising things and readjusting, but in fact a permanent reorganisation of society.
Just like war.
An incredible statement made in an incredible place by I wouldn't say an incredible man, but an incredibly vile man. And that really marks something that I think is important for us, because where does it stop? Where does it end? At the moment in our work, what we're seeing internationally is in fact that they're focusing their efforts when it comes to attacking income support programs on disability benefits. That's one of the cutting edges of the attack, is to attack disability benefits. They are actually creating, in Cameron's Britain right now, 10,000 people have died in the last year within 6 weeks of being assessed fit to work by the assessment system. That's the enormity of what's being unfolded. That's what they're actually implementing, and that's what they're doing to people. So let me say that I think, and it's appropriate to say on May Day, that we are seeing emerge a massive and a powerful anti-austerity movement. But what it must become is not simply an anti-austerity movement, it must become a movement against capitalism. That is the turning point. Because the people that think, those of us that think that the austerity agenda is some bad choice, and that and a more appropriate choice could happen if only we could find the right arguments and submit an appropriately eloquent brief to one of their committees or whatever, is making a profound mistake. Austerity is actually a product of the system under which we live. The austerity agenda is a manifestation of the capitalist system, of a logic of the system that is bigger than any government, bigger than any individual, and that is what we are up against. So on May Day, a day that celebrates a movement in Chicago that fought tooth and nail for the most immediate and practical benefits of working people and their demands, but at the same time was a profoundly anti-capitalist movement. That is the link that we have to make this May Day. We have to transform the movements across the world from movements that are merely protesting and condemning into movements that seek to bury the social and economic system that is the source of the austerity agenda. And if we can do that, if we can begin to make a contribution to doing that, then we can transform movements of resistance into movements of social transformation. That is what we must do. That is the course we must set ourselves on May Day. Thank you very, very much for this.
Okay, so before we go to our last speaker, and then of course we'll turn it over to the cultural part of the evening music, I want to tell everybody that as usual we have a raffle, and in our raffle tonight it is a bottle of tequila, straight from Mexico.
I'll drink to that.
Good.
I'll drink to
And if you drink to that, I'm sure you'll drink even more to a bottle of Cuban rum. Woo! Okay, and we have some books. We have a book featuring the work of Mexican muralist Diego Rivera. And we also have a book, if people remember, I guess it dates back to, the book is not so old, but it dates back to the 50s. It's a book about Stephen Truska. Remember the young man, the 14-year-old who got accused and went to jail, but they were going to hang him, but then they decided not to do that. And of course he's still alive today, but has to live under a different identity because they're still saying he's a criminal, even though they let him out of jail. Okay, so the tickets are 3 for $5 or $2 each, and we also have some DVDs as well, some old movies. So buy lots of tickets. If you don't like the DVD or the books, I'm sure you'll like the tequila. So, bye. Okay, so in saying that, we'll move to our last speaker of the evening. And our last speaker is someone who unites labor unionism, independent working class political action, and revolutionary socialist politics. For 20 years, he was the president of the Toronto Substitute Teachers and is now waging the fight for democracy and OSSPF. He is a former OPSU executive board member and is chairperson of the NDP Socialist Caucus. He is co-editor of SA Newspaper and federal secretary of Socialist Action. So please welcome my life partner and comrade, Barry Weisleder.
Good evening. In case you just arrived, this is not the funeral for Jim Flaherty. And Stephen Harper is not in the house. Now it's sad that Flaherty died at age 64, 3 weeks after resigning as finance minister. But why a state funeral? And what does that say about the state? The front page of the Toronto Star on April 11th snatched the halo by placing right beside a tribute to Flaherty, a large headline. CBC to slash 657 jobs due to budget shortfall. The connection is quite clear. Prime Minister Stephen Harper is such a busy fellow these days. He's presiding over a bunch of funerals. There is the funeral for public services in Canada. There is the funeral for free collective bargaining. There is the funeral for clean and healthy environment. There is the funeral for democratic rights, including the right to vote. I guess it's a good time to be an undertaker, unless your clientele is working class and you expect to be paid. But more about negatives shortly. Let's consider some positive signs. First of all, there is the powerful Raise the Minimum Wage movement. In the United States, the $15 minimum wage campaign won a referendum in SeaTac, state of Washington. A revolutionary socialist by the name of Kshama Sawant was elected to city council in Seattle. Walkouts at Walmart stores and fast food restaurants demanding pay increases and union rights show that a new generation of workers is stepping up to the plate. Here, the campaign to raise the minimum wage is gaining strength. We say that should be a fight for $17 an hour. But everyone should join the current campaign. The Ontario New Democratic Party leader, Andrea Horwath, is shamefully keeping her distance from it. But we say the NDP should join with Sid Ryan, the OFL, and the entire labor movement to fight for $14 now! Now turning to world affairs. Canadian imperialism and NATO suffered a stinging defeat in Afghanistan. Occupation cannot subdue a people indefinitely. You know, the reactionary Taliban forces actually prospered under foreign military intervention. And while Western interference continues in the region, the forced exit of the bulk of Canadian forces is a victory for not only for the Canadian and the global anti-war movement. It hastens the day when the workers, farmers, women and youths of Afghanistan will be able to throw off their foreign and domestic oppressors and create a government in the interests of the majority. Here's another victory. 2 of the Cuban 5 are free at last. And of course, the struggle continues until all 5 are free and until the U.S. embargo of revolutionary Cuba is ended once and for all. On April 7th, Quebec Solidaire increased its votes and seats in the Quebec National Assembly. Quebec Solidaire showed that it is possible to gain support by advocating sovereignty and anti-capitalist measures while opposing the PQ's racist charter of values. Meanwhile, the European Union, Washington, and Ottawa have been stymied in Ukraine. The U.S. funded and organized a coup to overthrow the elected government of Viktor Yanukovych. They installed an ultra-right-wing neoliberal regime. It includes several ministers from the neo-Nazi Svoboda party. But ethnic Russians in Crimea and eastern Ukraine rebelled and are rebelling. The pushback by Washington prevents NATO from encircling Russia with nuclear terror. We don't support the gangster Vladimir Putin, be clear about that, or the oligarchs who amass riches by stealing public property on both sides. But workers worldwide can take comfort in the fact that Western imperialism is momentarily stalled from imposing extreme neoliberalism. It is blocked for the moment from turning Ukraine into another Greece. And what is our task in Canada? Well, I think our task is to tell Stephen Harper where he can stuff his CF-18 jets. We say hands off Ukraine, hands off Venezuela, Canada out of NATO, out of the Middle East, out of Africa, out of Asia, Canada out of the North Atlantic Treaty Alliance. Unwarranted secrecy and stonewalling and illegal law initiatives and voter suppression, these continue to be the hallmarks of the Stephen Harper-led Conservative government. Some of them fall flat, as did Harper's attempt to appoint an ineligible judge to the Supreme Court of Canada. But on other fronts, Harper's autocratic agenda is pressing ahead. A prime example is the lifelong gag order imposed on some of Ottawa's top officials and lawyers in the name of national security. Anyone who deals with foreign or domestic policy or with security and intelligence faces up to 14 years in prison for disclosing information without permission. Is there an Edward Snowden in Ottawa? And when it comes to the release of government documents through Freedom of Information system, longer delays are a certainty. A federal court judge recently allowed National Defense a 3-year extension on delivering records requested under the Access to Information Act. The request was for documents related to the sale of surplus Canadian military assets to Uruguay. Secrecy can have literally explosive consequences when it involves the transportation of hazardous goods. Remember the Lac Mégantic rail disaster in July 2013? It took 47 lives, and it reduced a town center to fire and ashes. Concern is growing over the big rise in the number of trains carrying crude oil through densely populated urban areas, including Toronto. But Canadian National and Canadian Pacific refuse to disclose details about hazardous goods transiting our cities. Finally, the voter suppression tactics of the Harper Conservatives have everyone, even sections of the corporate elite, upset. The bone of contention is the Fair Elections Act. Could George Orwell have named it any better? It would do away with votes cast by people who have only a voter information card or the help of a friend or family member or neighbor to vouch for them. About 120,000 people voted this way in 2011. Many of them were seniors, youths, Aboriginal people, or disadvantaged citizens. Arguably the kind of people who are less likely to vote Conservative. Yesterday's minor concessions by Minister Pierre Poilievre don't alter the thrust of the poisonous bill still before Parliament. A poll in early March showed that 62% of Canadians believe that the Conservative government is settling political scores with Elections Canada, which the new law would bar from promoting voter participation as well as weaken its ability to investigate wrongdoing. Well, what prompted this tit for tat? Remember robocalls? The robocalls affair? The Conservative Party is accused of widespread efforts to suppress the votes of non-Conservatives by sending them to false polling place locations. So I think it is beyond sheer chutzpah that the Tories are taking this opportunity to skew election procedures to their advantage and to grease the skids for their hated agenda of austerity, authoritarianism, and war. But that's increasingly what the parties of the ruling rich are doing everywhere. Conservatives, liberals, Obama Democrats, and so-called socialists in France. They do this because their system, the capitalist system, is on its last legs and needs every possible prop to keep it standing. Ottawa can deliver jets to NATO in Poland, but it can no longer deliver the mail to your home. Its priority is pipelines, not postal services. On March 15, nearly 100 people answered the call of Socialist Action to picket the office of Conservative MP Joe Oliver, who's now the finance minister. More than a dozen labor unions, political parties, and community groups rallied to demand that Canada Post and the federal government reverse the decision to phase out home mail delivery to over 5 million addresses and refrain from increasing the price of postage. There was extensive TV coverage of the event, and as I told the media then, the scheme to curtail home mail delivery is part of a plan to gut the federal public sector, to shrink postal workers' pensions, and to break a progressive democratic union. It's part of a scheme to sell profitable parts of Canada Post Corporation to private sector vultures. The struggle against that continues. What about the Ontario provincial government under Liberal Premier Kathleen Wynne? It's trying to cover up a cover-up. Does it really matter whether the government computer records were wiped clean a few days before or a few days after Wynne took office? I mean, really? It's the bloody same party, as my English friends would say. It's the same government that not only squandered $1 billion in unwanted gas plants, it suspended free collective bargaining and the right to strike for education workers. It froze wages, cut public services, raised university student fees, and watched gridlock and decay tighten their grip on Canada's biggest city. that brings me to the Toronto municipal election. Who can stay away from this one? You know, that Rob Ford really cracks me up. Maybe I should put it another way. Y'all know Rob Ford's a crackhead, but that's not even 1% of the problem at City Hall, I want to say. What a shame it would be if voters go to the polls on October 27th and sideline that bozo politician, but continue to be saddled with his anti-worker, capitalist austerity agenda at Toronto City Hall. Is that possible? Well, let's look at the situation concretely. Toronto suffers from paralyzing traffic gridlock, deteriorating social services, overcrowded substandard housing for migrant workers, growing homelessness, rising threats to health and safety from air pollution and from the shipment of hazardous materials via rail and pipelines. Taxes and user fees go up and up, while public transit, libraries, the arts, and recreation facilities are starved of funds. Toronto's unemployment rate is higher than the national average, especially for young people. Good wages get slashed by privatization, as occurred when Rob Ford and City Council sold off garbage collection west of Yonge Street to a private for-profit corporation. Guns are increasingly the tools of drug gangs on the streets, offering youths a dismal, twisted alternative to hunger and hopelessness. Instead of prevention, there is repression. The innocent are victimized twice, by poverty and also by cops who stop and search racialized youths, cops who shoot first and ask questions later when they spot trouble. Overcrowding in substandard housing breeds death and destruction. That fire that killed 2 and injured 10 on March 20th in an illegal Kensington Market rooming house not far from here is a grim reminder of the cost of neglect. Meanwhile, there is a mad boom in condominium construction. Only the super rich foreign investors can afford to buy, oftentimes. Elite owners, they rent to workers and speculate on rising property values. Many renters face illegal key deposits, huge rent increases to cover rising maintenance fees, poor quality construction, and an inability to get things fixed by absentee landlords. Right. These problems did not start with Rob Ford and his administration. Right. Decades of malfeasance and neglect under Miller, under Lastman, and their predecessors occurred. The fundamental problem is not individual. It is systemic. Growing decay and glaring inequality in Toronto emanates from an unwillingness to tax the rich and to find solutions, to fund them. And that unwillingness stems from big business control of City Hall and the Toronto District School Board. So long as the profit-obsessed master class rules, the vast majority of the people suffer. To build rapid transit and decent affordable housing, to support schools, the arts, and public parks, to combat racism and inequality, it is necessary to spend money. And money for social purposes in a capitalist society must come from taxation. But workers, seniors, and the poor are grossly overtaxed. Justly, they want to punish politicians who would burden them with a heavier tax load. So what's the solution? Clearly, it's necessary to make big business, the giant banks, land developers, and wealthy religious institutions to bear the burden of funding social needs. Of course, tax reform can be rapidly reversed. Socialists argue, therefore, that the battle for wealth redistribution must rise to a struggle for public ownership and workers' control of the commanding heights of the economy. Only by expropriating capital and investing the wealth produced by working people, produced by us, according to a democratic plan, can human needs for good health, housing, education, and culture be met. But how is Toronto going to start to move in that direction? Who are you going to call? The NDP, Labour Council, Olivia Chow, Ghostbusters? Friends, we need a campaign that names the problem and that names the solution. We need a Labour and school board. We need a workers' government. The starting point is to reintroduce party politics at the municipal level. We say reintroduce because party politics was the norm in Toronto from the 19th century up to the 1970s. That's when big business pressure combined with muddle-headed middle-class populism killed working-class politics. And the rest, as they say, is history. It's a sad history of decline and retreat from social justice gains and goals. Socialist Action fights for labor political representation combined with revolutionary socialist policies. For the past 3 years plus, since the Ford triumph in 2010, we have drawn the lessons of the Miller debacle and the Ford disaster. We argued for an NDP Labour Council-sponsored convention to discuss and adopt a workers' agenda and to select candidates for all municipal offices. And such candidates would be morally, organizationally, and politically accountable for their actions as tribunes of the working class. Electoral efforts should be coupled with mass action in the streets and in the workplaces. The campaign to put food in the budget set a good example when on February 19th it put Ontario Liberal Premier Kathleen Wynne on trial for grossly underfunding welfare and disability income recipients. Another example is provided by the Ontario Coalition Against Poverty, which disrupted the Ontario Liberal Party convention, demanding the party take action to end poverty. And a further example was the mass picket at the office of MP Joe Oliver that we organized to defend home mail delivery. With only 6 months to Election Day and a total lack of political will by the Labour and NDP leadership, it is clear that mass, grassroots, decisive political action convention organized by the NDP and the unions is unlikely to occur. Nevertheless, this remains the only way forward for workers in 2014 through 2018, 2022, and beyond. That is why socialists will be making this argument relentlessly and forcefully. It is why we will be fighting for socialist policies in the months ahead, particularly among the supporters of Olivia Chow and the various unofficial NDP candidates endorsed by the Toronto Labour Council. So we urge you to join us in this effort. Let's be clear. There is no market solution to the crisis of capitalism. The capitalist market created the problem. Only a social revolution can solve it. Only by taking control of the major means of production, like the Cubans did over 52 years ago. Only by instituting democratic planning in harmony with nature does humanity have any hope of survival. That's what Socialist Action is all about. Educating, agitating, and organizing for fundamental change. That's why we host rebel films, public forums, and conferences. That's why we organize demonstrations like the February 6th protest against Russia's anti-gay law and the picket to defend postal services. That's why we invite you to join us at Allen Gardens next Thursday, May 1st, to honor International Workers' Day. And that's why you don't want to miss Socialism 2013. Capitalism is organized crime, just like it says on the yellow button. On May 23rd and May 24th at Oisey U of T. Make sure you get your tickets tonight. Central to our strategy for workers' power is the building of a class struggle opposition and unions in the NDP. We back Hassan Husseini's campaign for the CLC presidency in that vein. SA aims to advance the fight against the boss class. In this process, a mass revolutionary workers' party will be formed. Such a party is the key to a future of freedom and prosperity, but it cannot be built without you. And as Gandhi once said, do you think you are too small to make a difference? Then clearly you haven't shared your bed with a mosquito. So please, don't wait for the next economic crash. Don't wait for the next environmental catastrophe. Join the fight against capitalist austerity and for union democracy now. Join Socialist Action today. Together we can make the world a place truly fit for human beings. Have a wonderful, festive, and red May Day.